how's it going everyone? Welcome back to Kingfish Simple. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing a little video on how to care for the dwarf neon rainbow fish. Now this can also be called the Praecox rainbow. This is an Australian native fish. It comes from the northern New Guinea area all the way up to northern Australia. It's a really cool fish. It stays under 2 inches. It's a schooling fish, and you guys have been asking for me to give you some more information on them heaps. I've been seeing heaps of people saying that they want to get them in the comments and all that kind of stuff, because I've only just started keeping these guys again, and I've just fallen in love with these guys. So make sure you stay around to the end of the video to get all the information. Today we're not going to be talking too much about the breeding because I'm going to save that for another separate series, so make sure you guys stay around for that if you guys are interested. But today we're going to be talking about all the care. I'm going to talk about all the parameters and things you need to know before you get these guys. So like I said, these guys are very, very peaceful fish. They are a schooling fish and they stay under about 2 inches. So these guys are dwarf rainbow fish. They don't have as much color as stuff like the Boesmanis do, and when I mean that, I don't mean they don't have color, they just don't have the same kind of variation that the Boesmanis do. So I'll chuck up a couple photos here and show you what they look like compared to the Boesmanis. These guys have this awesome iridescent display. They're one of the most beautiful fish I think that I've ever kept, and I absolutely love them. Now these are definitely not a beginner fish at all. I wouldn't recommend these for beginners at all. I've had heaps of trouble in the past with these guys, well recently too, just with disease. These guys are very, very finicky and sensitive, and I think this is because they are relatively new to the hobby. So a lot of people haven't been keeping these guys for that long. So species like the angelfish, for instance, have been kept in the hobby for so long, they become more used to water parameters. Like, they're not as sensitive as they were when they were first caught, because when you think about it, like a tank has such a variable environment because it's such a small body of water, so little changes can affect the tank a lot, and fish that have been kept in aquariums and bred in aquariums for such a long period of time are more immune to this and not going to get as many problems. If you take a big lake, for instance, compared to a fish tank where there's so much more water, you have to add so much stuff to make the water parameters change in the lake. The fish from the wild are going to be brought into your aquarium, they're not going to be used to that kind of stuff. So that's my only disclaimer. These guys have been quite tricky and sensitive, and the other thing I've noticed is a lot of fish stores actually don't sell these with that good of quality. So what I had to do was, when I bought them, it was a total nightmare. These guys had heaps of problems. I'm literally still dealing with these problems with my adults at the moment. We had heaps of infections and all that kind of stuff. I don't think this is a fault on my part. I've been doing my water changes and all that kind of stuff, and all the other fish in the aquarium seem to be okay. I believe this is an issue with the pet store. I'm just letting you guys know that these guys are very sensitive. The reason I believe this too is I've bred these guys while they were sick, and the fry are doing absolutely fine. So I don't think it's due to me. I think it's just a revolving issue that started with the aquarium store bringing it in and then not doing that proper quarantine and all that kind of stuff. So that's just a little disclaimer. These guys are very tricky to take care of sometimes. They're not as tricky as stuff like discus and all that, but they can be pretty sensitive. Now these guys need to be kept in groups of about 6 or more, otherwise they'll have like little problems. They'll get a bit anxious, they won't come up to the top of the aquarium. I've noticed a lot with rainbow fish that if you keep them in groups of over 6, like even up to 10, they become a lot more confident and they will be way more happy to eat and all that kind of stuff, because that's just how their brains are wired. So they like to be in groups, they like to be in schools. It's pretty cruel to keep them in groups under 6. Over 6 is perfect. I recommend keeping like up to 10, and minimum tank size for a group of 6 I'd say is about 20 gallons. These guys are very small. I'd recommend if you're keeping 10 or more, maybe to put them in a 4-foot aquarium just to give them a bit of extra room, especially they'll grow a little bit quicker and all that kind of stuff. So now another thing about these guys is they can be pretty pricey, especially here in Australia. I don't know about other countries. I've heard about them being a lot cheaper, like in the US and all that kind of stuff, but here we are paying a very, very expensive price for these guys, up to $15 a fish. So that might be something to consider for you guys if you're willing to take that risk on. That's up to you. I know that in the US I've heard of people even buying them for $3 US, which is like $4.50 Australian, I think. We don't know what the current economy, it's 2020 right now. So if you guys watching this in the future, this is a really weird time. So it's just something to keep in mind. Now temperature wise, these guys are tropical fish, so they need to be kept in about 22 to 26 degrees Celsius, which is 72 to 79 degrees Fahrenheit. They aren't too sensitive with the pH. I know for a fact that they like the pH to be above neutral, all the way up to about 8. You can keep them underneath this, but they're going to be a lot more happier if you keep them above 7. So 7 to 8 is pretty good. I wouldn't recommend keeping them below 6.5 just because they are a little bit sensitive. So now these guys are really, really picky eaters, I've noticed as well. Mine especially are very picky eaters. They absolutely go crazy and ballistic for baby brine shrimp. That's just their favorite thing to eat. But they will take a wide range of foods. They like to eat bloodworms, baby brine shrimp. They like to eat some algae wafers and all that kind of stuff just to get that little extra bit of nutrients in them. That spirulina and all that kind of stuff is really helpful for them. I've noticed that they're a little bit more fussy, especially when you feed them really well like I do, with eating flakes and all that kind of stuff. They do take it, but it's just quite obvious that they don't appreciate it the same way as as they do with the other foods. So mine maybe are just really picky. That's just another disclaimer. I'd recommend feeding a lot of different kinds of protein because these guys are a top dwelling fish. So when you think about it, in the wild, they're gonna be looking for bugs and all that kind of stuff up the top of the lakes and all that kind of stuff. So I try and feed mine more of a protein source diet. I always feed a little bit of veg in there, but like it really doesn't matter that much. And these guys can live for about 4 years. So if you're wondering how long they live for about 4 years. Now, sexing these guys can be a little bit tricky. It's not too hard if you've got really good water parameters where they're displaying their colors a lot. Males will have a red outline on their fins and on their tail, and females will have a yellow outline. It's pretty hard to tell when they're a bit younger. When they're a bit older though, it's a lot easier. If you're gonna keep these guys in a group of 6, I'd recommend to have a 50-50 ratio of genders. That's just how they like to have it. So if you have 3 males to 3 females, that'd be perfect. And up from there, it's pretty much the same rule. You kind of want to keep a 50-50 ratio. It doesn't really matter too much, but I've noticed that it does make a difference, especially in breeding and all that kind of stuff. It does help a lot. In breeding though, I would recommend to keep a little bit more females than males. Now, my biggest tip for caring for these guys is gonna be water conditions. The water parameters are the most vital part of keeping these fish, just because you want to keep it as consistent as possible, you want to keep it as clean as possible, and you don't want to predispose them to anything that could have problems. For instance, you want to keep these guys in the best water parameters as possible. Like, you want to do water changes at least twice a week. I'd recommend doing 25% water change just to make sure that the water stays really clean, and I'd have a little bit of extra filtration in the aquarium to make sure it stays extra pristine. I would recommend to keep them in planted aquariums, and I'd recommend to also keep a little bit of moss in there in case they want to go and lay eggs in there and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't matter too much, but if you keep them in a planted aquarium, they're going to absolutely love it. Definitely wouldn't recommend this for beginners. If you guys are looking for something that's a little bit different and you've been keeping fish for a little bit of time, you're pretty confident with keeping fish, maybe give these guys a go, especially if they're going to be a little bit like cheaper in your area. If they're going to be expensive, I wouldn't recommend them to anyone except for very experienced people who've done a lot of aquarium keeping. So that pretty much wraps up the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching it. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.